I'm going to show you how you can actually migrate an ESXi with a VDS switch installed over to NSX, right, with the NSX virtual distributed switch. So over here, right, I have a cluster that's got two ESXi hosts, and on one of the ESXi hosts, NSX NVDS has already been successfully configured. On the ESXi host number 4A, it has not been configured with the NSX NVDS itself. So if we take a look at the vCenter setup over here, right, you can see that on ESXi 3A, right, it has got the VDS installed, and it has also got the NSX NVDS installed. The VMK interfaces, right, of this host has already been migrated to NVDS, right. That includes the VMK0, it includes the VMK1 for storage, and it also includes the VMK interface for vMotion. Alright, on ESXi 3A, the virtual machines are still right on the distributed port groups that are created on the normal VDS. So basically, right, to migrate the virtual machine over to the NVDS, right, is basically a question of selecting the virtual machine. Like for example, H01, right, is basically running on host 03A, and basically, right, if you want to migrate it over to the NVDS, for example, right, you basically click on that virtual machine, select edit settings, and then what you can do is that you can browse over to the available so-called logical segments, right, that are on the NVDS itself. Okay, so what I'm going to show you next, right, is that basically on 04A, right, currently it only has got the VMware distributed switch, right. It doesn't have the NVDS yet, so I'm going to show you how you can actually install the NVDS on ESXi 4A, and at the same time migrate the VMK interfaces over to the NVDS itself. So back to the NSX user interface itself, over here, right, on the NSX user interface, I have already pre-created a couple of logical segments, right, and the purpose of these, right, are to contain the VMK interfaces for the ESXi management, right, for storage as well as for vMotion. So for example, for storage, I've created a VLAN backed logical segment that sits in this transport zone, right. It is basically untagged, all right. And for the ESXi management interface, right, there is this uplink, right, VLAN backed logical segment that is also in the same VLAN transport zone. It's also untagged. And for the vMotion interface, right, basically it's the same, right. It's also in the VLAN backed it's a VLAN backed logical segment, right, in the VLAN transport zone, and it's also untagged itself. All right, so if I go back to the fabric settings, right, and I take a look at my nodes over here, so what I'm going to do is that you can see that there are two hosts inside this cluster, and at the moment I have only installed NVDS on one of them. So you can see that, right, on a per cluster basis, right, you do not have to install the NVDS on all nodes of the same cluster at the same time, but you can choose which host within the cluster you want to install the NVDS itself. So the version that I'm using for NSX is version 2.4. So the steps here will be very similar for version 2.5.1 as well. So I'm going to click on 04A, and I'm going to click configure NSX, and basically, right, I'm going to put it into the VLAN transport zone, right, that contains the logical segments that I've created. So this transport zone already has got a NVDS predefined in it, so I choose the default NIOC profile, and I have actually created an uplink profile, right, which I will show you later on. So the uplink profile basically defines the unique teaming characteristics, and basically I'm going to disable LLDP, so IP address assignment for the VTEP on the NVDS itself, in this case it defaults to DHCP, so I'm not going to change that. So on the ESXi 04A node itself, right, it has got two physical adapters, VMNIC 0 and VMNIC 1, and I'm going to map them to the respective uplink onto the NVDS. Basically, I am migrating the physical uplinks from the VDS over to the NVDS. Okay, and I will do the same for VMNIC1, and it's going to be mapped to uplink number 2 on the NVDS itself. So over here is where I will define how the VMK interfaces are going to be migrated. Alright, so I will select the first VMK0, which is the ESXi management, and I'm going to map it to the uplink VLAN backed logical segment that I've created inside this transport zone. And I'm also going to do the same right for the storage, and I'm going to map it to the storage VLAN backed logical segment. And finally, the VMK interface for vMotion will be mapped to the VLAN backed logical segment that has been created for vMotion. Okay, so once that is done, right? Okay, I am pretty much ready, right, to configure and to set up the NVDS on ESXi04A itself. So I click on finish. Alright, and you'll kickstart the process of installing the NVDS right on ESXi04A, and at the same time what it will do is that it will migrate the uplinks from the VDS right over to the NVDS, and it will also migrate the VMK interfaces from the VDS over to the NVDS as well. Okay, so this will take a while, so let's give it some time. So while this is running, right, I just wanted to also show you the edge uplink profile that was being used. So basically inside this edge uplink profile, right, I am defining how the uplink interfaces should be used together. So in this case, right, I'm using an active standby mode of operation for the uplinks of the NVDS itself. Right, it's basically it's a failover order. Right, there are other NIC teaming options that are available over here, right, including load balance source as well as load balance source MAC. But for simplicity, right, I am basically using the failover order mode of NIC teaming. So the transport VLAN has been set to 0 over here, right, meaning that the VTEP interfaces, right, will be created on the untagged VLAN itself. Okay. So let's go back over here to see if this has been completed. Nope, it is still installing, so let's give it some time. So click on the refresh, it will probably take a while. While it is installing, okay, I will just also show you the idea of a transport zone. So for NSX, right, there is the concept of a transport zone that defines the span of a logical segment, right, and that is true for both VLAN backed logical segments as well as overlay backed logical segments as well. So over here, right, I have basically 2 VLAN based transport zone and 1 overlay transport zone. So a node itself and ESXi host can be part of both a VLAN as well as an overlay transport zone, meaning that it will be able to have access to both VLAN backed as well as overlay backed logical segments. And over here, the compute manager is where I will set up the integration between vCenter and the NSX manager itself. So once NSX manager is integrated with vCenter, basically it has got visibility into all the hosts that are managed inside that vCenter itself, and that is how over here, right, you have the ability to see all the different vSphere clusters and you can actually set like which are the ones for which you want to enable NSX functionality itself. Okay, so it looks like the configuration has been done. Alright, it takes a while for the node status to be reflected as up. Alright, let's give it a while to refresh this. Okay, so meanwhile, let's take a look at what's happening on the vCenter side of things. So on the vCenter side of things, right, if you do a refresh. Okay, so you see that ESXi 4A right here has got the distributed switch. That's the one that has been created by vCenter, and it has also got the NVDS, which has been installed by NSX. So you see that the NVDS has taken ownership of the physical links on the ESXi host, and the VMK interfaces, right, alright, for storage, vMotion, and ESXi management have all been migrated to the VLAN backed logical segments that I have created on NSX itself. Okay, so so if I go back to check the status on NSX, just take a look. Alright, but it takes a while, right, for the node status to be reflected as up. And over here, right, if I want to then subsequently migrate, right, some of the workloads over, right, to the NVDS, I can actually do that. So for example, H02 is residing on ESXi 4A. Alright, and basically what I can do is that I can do to edit the virtual machine, okay, and then I can select which logical segment, right, I want to stitch the interface to. So you see that like storage is basically the VLAN backed logical segment that I've created on NSX. You can actually attach it to these logical segments, or whatever other logical segments that you create on NSX will be visible here as well, and will be available as an option for you to attach the VM interfaces to. Okay, it's taking a while, right? But in a nutshell, right, this is basically how it is actually being done. Alright, just let it, yeah, so finally you see that ESXi 4A has been successfully configured with NSX, and the node status is actually up. So with that, that is basically the end of the demo.